Hello everyone, my name is Gemma O'Doherty and I'm an investigative journalist. Most of my work revolves around investigating corruption in public office, primarily in the police. People often ask me, why does Ireland have such a particular problem with corruption? It's very simple. There's a toxic combination of ingredients involved. Ireland has a tiny population and an even tinier elite. They all went to the same schools, golf the same greens, and share each other's secrets. And when those secrets threaten to embarrass them, they have the ability to make them vanish, while our neutered media turn the other way. Add that to a country that is pretty much oblivious to the concepts of transparency and accountability, and you have the conditions in which corruption is able to thrive. We know that power corrupts and that absolute unbridled power with no checks and balances will always corrupt absolutely. That's just the way humans are. If you're a member of the elite in Ireland, you can make anything disappear. Drink driving, tax evasion, paedophilia, even murder. The death of our longest and youngest missing person, a 6-year-old child called Mary Boyle, was covered up by one phone call from a politician to a Garda station. In 1985, a priest was bludgeoned to death in a mansion not so far from here. There were senior politicians present at a party in the house where he was murdered, and so they and some members of the judiciary and Gardaí came together to make that case disappear. The chief suspect is still walking our streets. At the other end of the country in Cork, a British man has been framed for the murder of a French woman for the last 22 years because to identify the real killer would completely shatter the reputation of our already tarnished police force. And in one Dublin courtroom, convicted child abusers get suspended sentences with disturbing frequency when they come before a certain judge. Where is the outrage? You certainly won't find it on the 9 o'clock news or on the headlines of the daily papers. I'm a pariah within my own profession because I blame the media for much of the corruption that has infested Irish public life. I believe the mainstream media has not only allowed corruption to fester, but it is now as corrupt as the power it is supposed to hold to account. When I became a reporter more than 20 years ago, journalism was a vocation. Its job was to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted, to speak truth to power, to defend the underdog and the marginalised on the basis that you would create a fairer and better society for everyone. When you challenged a politician about the scandal of the day, you kept at them until you got answers. Your driving ambition, and that of your editors, was to get a resignation in the hope that the same scandal would not happen again. But Irish journalists, by and large today, quiver in the face of power. They are no longer relentless in the pursuit of the truth. They do not demand it. They behave more like compliant diplomats and spin doctors, tiptoeing around government ministers and senior police officers for fear of upsetting them, behaving more like sheep than tenacious defendants of the public interest. The reality is that they themselves have become fully fledged members of that elite. Time and time again, they let the public down by shielding scandals from view and failing to demand accountability on their behalf when their taxes are being squandered. They have become lapdogs, not watchdogs. They're too frightened to stand up to authority and demand accountability. That is why we have so many scandals ongoing in Ireland today. Last week, the richest politician in the land was found guilty of serious tax offences, yet he walked out of court a free man. The public outrage reverberated across social media, but in the press and on the state broadcaster, it was promptly knocked off the news agenda, replaced by some distracting news stories about the papal visit or the weather. Do you wonder why RTE is feeding the public so much foreign news, and Trump news, and Brexit news, and weather news, and good news on a daily basis? It is to distract you from the issues that really matter. It's no wonder that the head of RTE picked up €340,000 last year. Politicians and police say publish, and the press comply. Citizens are feeling the winds of recession blowing again in our country, but the media will say anything to convince them that it's all in their minds. Like the story concocted by Gardaí and the Irish Times this week, that the increase in public order offences on our streets is actually down to the mythical recovery in our economy, when we all know it is due to the breakdown of law and order, due to poor policing, and also a growing sense of hopelessness felt by those who live on the margins. Mortgage arrears are on the up and have seen a recent surge. Don't worry, says the central bank. That was only due to a winter storm. The media published this nonsense without so much as raising an eyebrow. A few months ago, we learned the disturbing allegations that the biggest private media group in the country, INM, had been spying on its staff and therefore their sources. There was a time when a story like this would have brought journalists onto the streets. Those who work for the biggest owner of private media in Ireland, Denis O'Brien, appear to have no issue at all that their boss has threatened to silence other journalists and politicians. We have reached and passed peak hypocrisy. The tragedy for the public is that once the media are bought and paid for, it is the beginning of democracy's inevitable decline. Outwardly, Ireland really fancies itself. It likes to portray itself as a great little country with cool pop stars and lycra-clad politicians, and everyone having the crack. You could call it the narcissist of Europe, conceited, full of itself, and with an insatiable need for ego stroking. Just take a look at the stream of selfies that our government ministers churn out every day when they should be working day and night to fix our broken country. But like narcissists, inside Ireland is consumed with shame and a crippling inferiority complex, and so it should be. Let's take a look at the Ireland of today in numbers. 16% of the population are living below the poverty line. 700,000 of our people are on hospital waiting lists. Crime jumped by 16% last year. Sexual assaults are up by 15%. 10,000 sick people are languishing on trolleys. And the saddest statistic of all, almost 4,000 of our children have nowhere to call home. What sort of country have we become? Our beleaguered property market was recently classified as the most volatile in the world. Barely a decade since the last crash, young teachers, doctors and nurses have no hope of buying their own home without saddling themselves with an insane mortgage. Once again, they find themselves heading for the airport on one-way tickets. Families are broken up. The taxpayer who has funded their education is the loser once again. And who is pouring the fuel on our overheated economy? The media. Desperate for what is left of plummeting advertising revenues, the property supplements of Irish newspapers with their glossy ads and hyped-up headlines are urging people to buy at ludicrous prices, knowing the market is soon to implode again. The Celtic phoenix is rising from the ashes of the Celtic tiger, and this time around it will be much uglier. Because of the apathy of our political elite, Ireland has ended up footing the bill of Europe's last banking crisis to the tune of 42%. Our children and grandchildren will be paying off that debt for decades. But next time round, it's going to be a lot worse. Ireland is on the brink of another recession. And this time, we have a cabinet who are more interested in posting pictures of their latest vanity campaign. Time and time again, the people witness corruption in public office, but they never see anybody going to prison or losing their pensions. It's no wonder that they are suffering from chronic scandal fatigue. When a scandal emerges, the government's default position is to kick it off the pitch, to set up a review or an inquiry, to spend a fortune in public money paying lawyers to run it, and hope it will be all forgotten about by the time the next election comes around. They see so much of their taxes being squandered on wasteful reviews. They can't get hospital treatment when they need it. Their children can't afford to buy houses. They don't have a proper police force to protect them. Two political parties have dominated Irish life for a century, and they have left the country in ruins time and time again. This time probably worse than it ever has been, because never before have we seen the spectre of homelessness and so many people being forced to live in hotels and sleep on our streets. Why does it always have to be this way with Ireland? And the answer is hard to stomach. But like the deluded, battered spouse who keeps taking their abusive partner back, thinking that next time around, things are going to be different, the Irish people have voted these two same political parties back into power over and over again. Parties who have lied to them, cheated them, fooled them and squandered their hard-earned taxes. The public feel helpless and humiliated. They have behaved like victims and sheeple for too long, following the herd and voting in people who only have their own best interests at heart. When it all backfires in their faces, they turn to the media to express their outrage, but they are typically silent. But change is in the air. It's slowly dawning on Irish people that they have been duped by consecutive governments and bureaucrats in Brussels. They're starting to realise that the media have been treating them like mushrooms, keeping them in the dark and feeding them manure. They're starting to ask themselves why it is they live in the 5th richest country on the planet, yet 16% of their people are living in poverty. There is no reason in the world why we cannot look after our tiny population and our most vulnerable, the sick, the poor, the old, and the young. We have the resources to do so, but we have consistently elected politicians who have no vision and are too corrupt and incapable to manage them. They look to the rest of the world to save us, relying on tax-avoiding companies to bring in cheap jobs, instead of looking inside and building sustainable indigenous industries that will last. We are well able to stand on our own 2 feet as a country, if we were given the chance. The Irish have got off their knees before, and they can do so again. But this time, they must confront the enemy within. Real change begins with the smallest of steps, and in my opinion, that begins with starting with the media that you consume. Do you really want to buy newspapers and listen to radio stations owned by a man who tries to silence journalists and politicians and is the subject of a lengthy police investigation? Can you really justify watching a state broadcaster whose bosses and presenters make a killing on your taxes to keep you ill-informed? Imagine how much better our country would be if we had a robust, independent media that was able to hold power to account and protect your taxes. If we really want to see change in Ireland, we have to stop supporting the media's advertisers too. Go into any Irish newsagents and you will see how their shelves are stocked with superficial, sexist magazines that are designed to dumb you down, young women in particular. This is not an accident. Tell your local shop that you won't be providing your customer anymore until they start to support decent public interest products that are a benefit to all of society. The one thing that makes the Irish media so terrified is that they cannot control the message anymore. That's why they fear Facebook and Twitter so much. In a few weeks' time, politicians will be knocking on your doors. They will be looking for your vote. Don't fall for the glossy brochures that are being churned out of government buildings as we speak, funded by you. Hunt down and support new candidates who are talking about and prioritising corruption and promising to tackle it. If you feel strongly enough about it, run yourself. Ireland and the Irish are crying out for change. A new way of doing things that ensures that we stop making the same mistakes of the past. It can be done, and the moment for action is now. Thank you.